the Clinton-Trump dossier and what exactly it means. So this has been a big story this week, and my opinion on it has sort of been evolving over the course of the week. So at the beginning of the week, I thought maybe this is a little bit overblown. Then more evidence came out, and I thought this is really not particularly overblown. And now I think it's not overblown, but some people are taking it a step too far in their analysis. So I'm trying to be as intellectually honest as I possibly can about the information that we have about this Steele dossier and the information that came out earlier this week that Hillary Clinton and her campaign had basically funded it. So here is the backdrop. The backdrop is that for 9 months, we have been hearing that Donald Trump is the president of the United States because he colluded with Russia. And no one has been able to define what exactly collusion means, right? The pieces of evidence that have been presented are essentially 7. I'm going to name the pieces of evidence here in favor of the quote-unquote Trump-Russia collusion theory. So piece of evidence number 1 is that Trump said bizarrely warm things about Russia. Piece of evidence number 2 was that Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign manager, had very close ties with the Russian government. Piece of evidence number 3 was that his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, had some close ties with Russia Today and apparently with the Russian government. Fourth piece of evidence is that former Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page apparently had close ties with the Russian government. Fifth piece of evidence was that Donald Trump Jr. apparently approved of a meeting with a Russian-connected lawyer under the auspices of being from the Russian government and wanting Trump to win. Piece of evidence number 6 was that Trump fired FBI Director James Comey and then went on national television and basically said that he did it because Comey was pressuring him on Russia. And the final piece of evidence, it was this week, that Trump's data firm, which was owned by the Mercer family called the Cambridge Analytica, had apparently reached out to Julian Assange, who is apparently, according to most accounts, a Russian cutout, in an attempt to gain access to Hillary's missing emails. That is all the evidence. None of that evidence is final evidence of actual collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. That's a lot of smoke, but no fire. And for a year, we've been hearing the fire is coming, and there's been no evidence of the fire yet. Now they're saying, by the way, that Mueller's big report is supposed to break before Thanksgiving, which will be a media feeding frenzy. But if he doesn't have any more evidence than that, there's nothing there. So for a year, we've been hearing Trump has to be impeached. Trump is corrupt. Trump Russia, Trump Russia, Trump Russia, Trump Russia. It's the end of the world, Trump Russia. Okay, now, with that as backdrop, here is what we found out this week about Hillary Clinton's campaign and the Russians. So, for months, members of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton campaign apparently lied about whether they had funded the creation of an anti-Trump Oppo file called the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier we all found out publicly about in January. That was the dossier that BuzzFeed released that included all sorts of wild allegations, some of which have been confirmed about meetings between Trump officials and Russian officials, and some of which have yet to be confirmed and are frivolous at best, the stuff about Trump being peed on by Russian prostitutes and such. All of that was released by BuzzFeed in early January. The only reason that we found out about it was because we now know that it was being passed around Washington and that James Comey had presented a 2-page summary of some of the charges in there to President Trump himself. That's why BuzzFeed released it. Okay, so the Democrats said they had not been behind that dossier. We now found out this week that they lied, and that, in fact, Mark Elias, who is a lawyer for the Hillary Clinton campaign, had basically funneled the money to Fusion GPS to go compile the dossier. The person who compiled the dossier under Democratic auspices was Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele is the Steele dossier is a former MI6 spy. He went over to Russia, and then he had talks with a bunch of people in the Kremlin. Apparently, the allegation is that he passed them money, that possibly American money was passed to the Russian government in order to secure information about Donald Trump. The file itself, according to Byron York of the Washington Examiner, includes several sources from the Kremlin, including a senior Russian foreign ministry figure, a former top-level Russian intelligence officer still active inside the Kremlin, and a senior Russian financial official. Now, let's say that all those people had met with Donald Trump Jr. and provided him information. Everyone would say collusion, 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 impeachment. Right? Hillary Clinton actually did that. If you cut out the middleman, what you're seeing here is the Hillary Clinton campaign paid the Russian government or worked with the Russian government to find Oppo against Donald Trump. That's the exact allegation that is being made against the Trump campaign. Right? So ironic at best and criminal at worst, and I'm not the only one saying this. Jonathan Turley, professor over at Georgetown of Law, he says the allegations against Hillary Clinton thus far are more criminal than those against President Trump.
It's good to have something that's more recognizable as a criminal allegation. As you know, I've been very skeptical about the past Russian collusion claims as being a criminal matter, even though I supported the appointment of the special counsel after Comey was fired. I've been cautioning, and many others have, that it really isn't a crime to collude. And in the same sense, it wouldn't be a crime to receive information on the Trump side from a foreign national. But the allegations against the Clintons could potentially be criminal. Doesn't mean that they are criminal. The $500,000 given to Bill Clinton might have been innocent. The timing just might have been horrible. But that would be a cognizable crime if a linkage was found. In the same way, the allegation over the dossier does involve a potential violation of federal law. The Federal Election Commission Act requires campaigns to state a purpose for any money spent over about $200 to sort of have an item description for each of those amounts. There isn't an item description for this law firm for the amount of money that is being alleged to be given to this research firm.
Okay, so two things. So this is a perfect case of whataboutism in the sense that what Hillary Clinton did here was wrong. If the allegations were made about Donald Trump, would that make it right now? Would it be okay now? And this is where I think that this whole conversation seems to go off the rails a little bit. So let's say that Hillary Clinton had been elected president, and we had found out that she was colluding with the Russian government to gain oppo on Trump, and she was president, and then she released all that oppo, and that's why she won. Or let's say all of that had happened. Would we be crying impeachment right now? You bet your ass we'd be crying impeachment right now. We obviously would be crying impeachment right now. So the allegations the Democrats are making about Trump are exactly those allegations. Those have not yet been proven. There's no evidence for them. So just because Hillary did something that is apparently criminal here, or at least allegedly criminal, that does not necessarily mean that nothing criminal happened on the Trump side. With that said, the allegations and the evidence against Hillary Clinton's campaign, much, much, much stronger than anything that has been proven by against the Trump campaign at this point. I want to talk more about this, and I want to talk about the Mueller investigation, the impact on the Mueller investigation in just a second. First, now let's talk about how this impacts, the Hillary thing impacts the FBI investigation into Donald Trump. So on a political level, it impacts the investigation because now we're all saying, okay, so what the hell is the FBI investigating? Right? Why weren't they investigating Hillary Clinton? Why weren't they investigating the Hillary campaign? And in fact, there are now calls for the FBI to do exactly that. The House is going to call James Comey in front of them again and ask him why he was not investigating Hillary's collusion. Right, so that's point number one. On a political level, it makes perfect sense to say, okay, everybody's focused in on Trump. Really? Hillary was doing the same thing. And again, I think that that's fair on a political level. I don't know that it exonerates Trump from bad behavior if Hillary was also behaving badly. Right? There were allegations that the headquarters for Barry Goldwater were bugged in 1964 by LBJ. That didn't necessarily get Richard Nixon off the hook for doing the same thing at the Watergate Hotel. So let's talk a little bit about the actual impact on the FBI investigation. So there are two elements of the FBI investigation that have been impacted. One is that apparently the FBI obtained FISA warrants on Trump associates based on allegations in the Steele dossier. The allegation from people on the right is that the FBI was therefore colluding with Hillary and Russia. Basically, Hillary was colluding with Russia to come up with this dossier, and then the FBI took the unverified allegations in the dossier, threw them by a FISA judge, and then got that FISA judge to sign off on warrants to bug Carter Page and Paul Manafort, basically. That's the allegation. This seems to me evidenceless until the evidence actually arises, meaning that it is quite possible that the FBI knew about the allegations in the dossier and went and independently verified them. Not everything in the dossier is false. So people are saying the dossier is complete crap. Some things in the dossier are clearly complete crap. Some things in the dossier are not. Right? There have been actual verified meetings between some members of the Trump team and some members of the people who are associated with the Russian government. In any case, not everything in the dossier is not true. So it is quite possible that Comey, again, I'm talking as a lawyer, so from a legal perspective, you can suspect whatever you want, but it's only what you can prove that matters. From a legal perspective, there is no evidence that James Comey took unverified allegations from the dossier in cahoots with Hillary and then proceeded to throw them to a FISA judge so that we could get warrants on these guys. Okay, second allegation is that Comey, for political reasons, basically continued to fund the Steele dossier after Steele's name had been released, and after the Democrats had stopped funding the Steele dossier, that he found this stuff interesting, and for political reasons, he wanted to continue the funding into it. It's also possible for legal reasons he wanted to continue the funding into it because he felt that there was actual illegality taking place, and he wanted to investigate it. After all, he was the head of the FBI. So both of those don't see the evidence for that yet, and I am someone who is deeply skeptical of James Comey and thought he was absolutely wrong last July when he exonerated Hillary Clinton. I also thought he was wrong when he reopened in October. I think he was a garbage FBI director, but that still does not prove the allegations that are being made here. Final allegation that's being made is, or at least a claim that's being made, is by the editors over at the Wall Street Journal. So they write today, the fusion news means that the FBI's role in Russia's election interference probe must now be investigated, even as the FBI and Justice insist that Mr. Mueller's probe prevents them from cooperating with congressional investigators. So, again, I'm not sure that anything beyond suspicion unverified suspicion, suggests that the FBI was not doing its job in the Russian probe. Mueller is a former FBI director, and for years he worked closely with Mr. Comey. Okay, that's been true forever. So if you're saying that Mueller should accuse himself on that basis, that was true from the very start. And I'm not sure why that is now coming to the fore now. It says it is no slur against Mr. Mueller's integrity to say he lacks the critical distance to conduct a credible probe of the bureau he ran for a dozen years. Again, I'm not sure that I'm not sure that proves the point. I mean, you could just as easily say that as a former FBI director, he knows where all the bodies are buried, and says he could best serve the country by resigning to prevent further political turmoil over that conflict of interest. So my opinion on this is that this seems to be jumping the gun, right? Suggesting that Mueller has to go because he knows Comey. If you felt that way, that was true months ago. Suggesting he has to go because now the FBI is being accused of things for which there's no evidence yet, that also seems to me to be jumping the gun at best. To say that the entire investigation should just be shut down on the basis that both parties did it, that's at least a more honest opinion on what's happening here. And again, I think that this investigation is going to go forward. My strong hunch is that Mueller's not going to find anything, that what we know is what we know, and that Mueller is going to come forward with a couple of things the media will blow out of proportion, but there will be no hard evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and then this will all be over. That is my strong hunch on all of this. But I wanted to give you as objective a perspective on this as I can, which is that there appears to be criminal activity, or at least alleged criminal, very, very strong evidence of criminal activity from the Hillary camp. There's not nearly as strong evidence in the Trump camp. I don't know this is an excuse to shut down the special counsel investigation or to fire Mueller. That's my basic take on all of this. Okay.